A huge problem for those of us who grew up in families with abuse and neglect, definitely for me, maybe for you too, is that we end up with mean people all up and down our lives. Do you have that? They criticize you, they ridicule you, they ostracize you, they underestimate you, and they say terrible things about you that turn people against you. And I'm talking friends, relatives, coworkers, neighbors, bosses, definitely bosses, and of course, partners. It feels like mean people are everywhere and they come out of nowhere. It feels like you have no control over how you get treated. And while you might complain about their terrible treatment of you, do you find that you just keep letting them stay in your life? That's a trauma symptom. Why do we do that? I'm just going to talk about a few things that come to mind. It's what you know, right? If you grew up with people who mistreated you, you learn that it's normal for people to act like this. You learn that that feeling of like, when somebody says something really cruel to you, the way you feel kind of sucker punched or deflated or bad about yourself, it becomes so normal that you tolerate it. You just learn to put up with it. It seems like how everybody is. Or we call that in Crappy Childhood Fairy crap fitting. You learn to fit yourself to crap. And that crap meaning like unacceptable people, unacceptable situations. There's some sort of deep trauma-driven belief in there that that's what you have to do, that it's not negotiable, that if people treat you badly, instead of, they have to change or leave, or you leave, what your mind tells you is that you have to fit yourself to it. You're like, I can do it. I can take this. I'm tough. I have thick skin. Oh, that's a very unfortunate adaptation to trauma. Another reason is you're just no longer sensitive to mistreatment. You've had to armor yourself so much that you can't feel when people are mean to you. And have you ever noticed that? When you see somebody after a very long time, somebody who hurt you, sometimes when you had a little healing between now and then, you're just like, wow, why was I ever friends with this person? Or something that happens to me is sometimes in videos, I tell stories that are meant to make an illustrative point. And I'll say, yeah, I had this friend and she totally berated me after I made a film. And, people just said to me, that doesn't sound like a good friend. And there's been a few things like that where I've told a story, the stories about how people got so sick of me being endlessly needy. And it's a complicated story because, when I was hitting bottom with my trauma 30 years ago and I didn't know what was wrong with me, I had pushed almost everybody away. And I was begging for help and I would call people and ask for help and I would just talk and talk and talk. And it's a very, when you're in the middle of trauma, it's a very self-centered place, right? And so I would just forget who I was even talking to. I would never ask about them. I mean, I wasn't in a position to be mutually friendly or anything. I was desperate for help. And people got sick of it, and some people leveled with me. And one friend said, I'm just not putting up with this anymore. Another friend said, well, yeah, people aren't going to deal with this. She didn't leave me as a friend, but she was hard on me and realistic with me. But anyway, what's interesting is that in the comments, there were people who were like, I don't know, that just doesn't sound like a good friend. And it gave me pause. I think when you're a traumatized person, there's a lot of layers to the friendships that you've had. The people that you met a long time ago when you were still very traumatized, there's this stuff that happened and maybe it's never been apologized for. Maybe the silent treatment, maybe people didn't show up to help you when you needed help. Maybe people ganged up on you with others and then you run into them later and there just got to be a reason to keep them in your life. There's got to be a reason to keep mean people in your life. And just like trying to keep the peace isn't always a good enough reason. Or just believing that this is how all people are, it's not a very good reason. Now, I see that a lot in the comments. I've said this before. When I read the comments every day, usually first thing in the morning, and the really harsh comments come at night. And at night, there's a lot of people, maybe they've been drinking or maybe they're just going through the dark night of the soul. But there's a lot of comments that are just like, people are terrible. They're worthless. You can't trust anybody. And on the one hand, it's a weird kind of putting yourself on a pedestal to believe that everybody else is a terrible person. But I also think it's a very trauma-driven experience. It's an experience that comes with the territory of being very traumatized, because you end up drawn to and hanging out these mean people who literally don't care about you. They don't care about you, and it comes to appear like it's the whole world, but it's not the whole world. Now, another reason I think that we tend to surround ourselves with more than our share of mean people is because we carry a lot of shame and guilt. And shame and guilt, I think, is a mix of actual earned shame for things that we don't feel good about, and then this like sticky shame where just free-floating shame of people putting you down sticks to you. And I find that it can't stick to you so well when you clear up your own things that you do feel bad about. Like when I was a teenager, I shoplifted, and I was very sensitive for a long time about people not trusting me. But I hadn't really taken into account, like I was a teenager, my dad was dying, I totally forgive myself for doing it, but I felt quite bad about myself. I felt guilty, I felt ashamed, and my best friend's mom wouldn't let her hang out with me anymore as a result of that. And I carried this shame into adulthood. I never stole anything again, but I carried this shame into adulthood about it. And it wasn't until I like totally faced that and kind of worked it through my daily practice and talked to my 12-step sponsor about it that I was like, okay, that's taken care of. And I tried to even pay the money back for the thing I stole, but the business wasn't there anymore. And so you know what I did? I donated the money of the cost of the thing that I stole, and I added like 4% interest per year. And I donated that. And it actually did give me peace. You know, it may not have, you might say, well, what good does that do? But it gives you peace. And to start to be able to hold your head up again is very important if you're going to stop letting in mean people in your life. Because thinking of myself as somebody not worthy to hang out with other people because I had done this thing, yeah, that's, I did other, you know, I've made all kinds of mistakes in my life, but I keep learning that until I clear them up, I tend to feel so bad about myself that I have a hard time seeing and being sensitive to. That's where you lose your sensitivity. You can't feel the difference between right and wrong. Now, when you're in a good, self-regulated, healed state, and I teach a lot about how to re-regulate here on this channel. I teach it in my book, Reregulated, which I hope you have by now. There's a link down in the description section. When your nervous system is re-regulated, when you've cleared up mistakes you've made, apologized, made restitution if you need to, when you've put up your boundaries and expressed yourself to the people who have hurt you, it starts to really shake things out. Like people who have hurt you cannot stay in your life if you're honest with them, that you remember what they did, right? So sometimes that might not be your choice, is to confront or tell the truth, and that is okay. But it's something to put in your mind. And believe me, if it was something egregious that somebody did, it can really help to have a mentor or a therapist or somebody who walks you through something like that. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not always wise to go confront somebody who hurt you. The first time I did it, the first time I went and confronted my parents about the abuse that happened from a relative, they kicked me out of the house. And I found that out they did that to other family members too. There literally was no help for those of us who told and said that we had been abused. And so confronting ended up being this disaster. It was very upsetting, and it made me more unhappy. So it's a difficult thing. It's not a straight shot, but we have to find that equilibrium in ourselves to know that when I was abused as a kid, for example, I did nothing wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. And what I can change is how carrying that burden went forward with me. And there's definitely a pattern for so many traumatized people. You know, you may have it, I've had it. I'm getting so much better about it. I never feel like I'm totally free and out of the woods, though. I have to be vigilant about it. But I have this huge tolerance for mean people in my life, people who gossip and who are unfair and critical about stuff. And I'm getting better and better as a result of my healing at deciding when I want to speak up, when I don't want to speak up, when I want to get away from that person, and when I want to overlook the whole thing and just kind of love that person anyway. It's a choice. They're all choices. But they're choices that we can only make in a good way when we're awake, when we're regulated, when we're not living that trauma-driven bad dream of just like, I'm such a bad person, I have to put up with this. Or I have to be so spiritual. I'm so spiritual, I can just tolerate all this abuse. And I'm like on some higher plane. That's like called spiritual bypass, right? Now, I think also a really big reason why we will tolerate a lot of mean people in our lives it almost feels like we attract them, right? But I always challenge everybody. It's like, do you attract them or are you attracted to them? Or are you too tolerant of them? Like, those are three different things. It's good to be aware. If you're carrying an abandonment wound, if you have this deep fear of abandonment, if you carry a deep belief that if you better put up with these mean friends because you won't ever have other friends, or you better stay with this jerk because no one else will ever love you, that is an abandonment wound. And it's a poisonous one because it's simply not true. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, if you stay married to an abusive person, yeah, you're not going to be married to somebody else. That is a self-fulfilling prophecy. But you cannot have a better relationship with someone who cannot change and who continues to abuse you. And so there's this weird kind of dance that we get into with our own mind, this inner conflict of like, half the time we're thinking, I'm so miserable, I'm so pissed off about how I get treated in this relationship. And then, oh no, I'm scared they don't like me, I'm scared they're going to leave me. They're actually so good, this is the best I ever had. And it's like flip, flop, flip, flop. Have you done that? I've done it. It feels terrible. It's so demoralizing, right? And so what we need sometimes to break the spell that makes us think we have to do that, which is, totally forgivable, because that's what happens to traumatized kids. They get this kind of distorted thinking in that department. And what we need tools that help us get real, that help us process our feelings and say, wait a second, let me just write down the facts of what have happened here and how I feel about it. And we need human beings who will stay by our side and help us. And some people get that at a therapist. Some people get it in a 12-step fellowship. Some people get it, you could get it in our membership where we're totally focused on healing from childhood trauma. Some people get it from a best friend. Or, maybe you have a circle of friends who happen to really get you on this, and you guys stick together and support each other in stepping up out of the old trauma-driven thinking and the trauma-driven patterns. Patterns are hard to get out of, and we need a hand sometimes. It's very hard to do by yourself. And unfortunately, having lived through trauma, we often end up with this tendency to want to isolate. We just feel like I can't tell anybody what's going on, or, I don't want to show myself, or I've been in some sort of self-destructive behaviors and I'm ashamed of myself. And so we hide and we don't get the very things we need. So I have a word for this. When things are really bad and you don't know what to do and you have to do something and there's 20 things you could do, but where do you start? I call it, you break the wheel. You take this imaginary stick and you jam it. There's the spinning wheel of all the trouble, and you jam your stick in there and you break the wheel. You don't know where it's going to land. And what I'm trying to say is, you pick one thing that you can do. You pick one thing that you can do. You make a phone call to a hotline, or you walk to that meeting, or you pack a go bag and you get out of that house and you turn the page on the stuckness that you are in. Sometimes, if you feel like you can't take any action at all, you just feel totally frozen. If you can only do one thing, just go outside and move your body. Sometimes that can sort of wake you up a little bit, give you a little fresh air, move your nervous system around a little bit, enough to take a second action. There's nothing so precious as a first action, except a second action, because the second action leads to a third action and then a fourth action. And that's how we get out of it. You're not meant to be surrounded by mean people in your life. And that's why I asked you the question, why do you have so many mean people still in your life? I think when it's happening to us, it feels like there's no rhyme or reason, or people will say, I'm cursed, or the universe is out to get me. And I know that feeling. It does feel like that. But it can't really do that without some kind of cooperation from us. Well, I won't say never, because people certainly could be incarcerated, they could be kidnapped. There are conditions where you literally have no control over your environment. But most of the time we do have some control. And so life is always a mix of things I can't do anything about and a couple things I can, and we bring our focus. Okay, what can I do? So I encourage you to do it. It's so important. Your life is so important. Your happiness deserves to flourish. So please consider taking action right now on your own behalf to break that wheel, to take one action. If you need professional help, call for that. That's, when things get very tough, there's just no substitute for people who are connected to agencies and systems who can get you out of danger, who can help you hang on. And then the people in your life who you may not even know yet, people who are very, very good at being a friend to people like you. Wouldn't it be good to be in a circle of friends of people who get it and who are working on themselves, and not to have to fear being alone if you were to even change one of your mean relationships with people, even to just let one of those people go and to take them out of your life. It's so important to take action because abuse of any kind, it grinds you down until you don't feel like you could ever have a positive change. You can't even picture yourself having a good friend. Your thinking gets negative about yourself, about other people. And when you think that way, it repels good people. It pushes them away. They can sense it about you even when you're saying all the nice words. And this confirms your worst fears that this is the best you can do. And that's how you get trapped. The pain will show in your appearance. The pain will show in the home you live in. The pain will show in the job you choose. It will show in your choice of partners. A better life is meant for you, but it's blocked from reaching you. So that is how you change. Break that wheel. And I'm guessing that if you tolerate mistreatment from other people, you probably don't treat yourself very well either. And I'm talking self-care. So maybe you can't change other people today, but you can honor yourself. You can treat yourself with respect today, with the way you eat, with the way you dress. You can have one good day where you have 3 nice meals and you dress wearing something that you feel good in, and you spend your money wisely, but not too much. And you focus on your goals and you sit down quietly and write down a few things that you would like to get done in the near future. You do what you can to connect with something good, to disconnect from the bad and connect with the good. There's nothing more to life than a bunch of small steps. So sometimes we won't take that kind of action unless things get really hard. And it's okay to let that be how it happens. That's how I changed. I pushed everybody away. And then I started going to that 12-step program. Then I started working on myself. I started exercising. I went to grad school. I started working on my skills, and then one foot in front of the other. If you need a tool that's free and easy, that helps you to process the hard feelings that have you feeling overwhelmed all the time, try what I did. I call it the daily practice. It's a really simple writing technique to get those fearful and resentful thoughts out on paper and release them, and then rest your mind in meditation. You might be surprised how powerful it is. So I teach that for free in a short course. I also lead free calls twice a month for anybody who wants to come on Zoom. We do the techniques together. I take questions. I try to help everybody really learn the techniques. And where it all starts is take the course. It's right there. And you can just click on that and you're in. And then you'll get an email from me about when I'm doing calls that you can join. So try it out, and I will see you very soon.